This is Mark Lieberman, the host of the show The World According to Mark, brought to you through WPVM FM in Asheville, North Carolina. And today we have an interesting guest, comes from an interesting organization. Her name is Sarah Hart. Sarah, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So Sarah Hart and I met over the telephone when I was confirming that I wanted to be on something called a farm tour. And then I found out from Sarah that she was the communications manager for what is referred to as ASAP. And you can tell us what that means. And she told me a little bit about what she does. And I thought it would be important to let the world know a little bit more about her and what ASAP does. So Sarah, again, you've been with this organization, which I'm giving the acronym for. Tell us what it means and how you got there.
Sure. So ASAP stands for the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. And we're a nonprofit based here in Asheville, serving the region, the Southern Appalachian region. And our mission is to help local farms thrive, link farmers to markets and supporters, and build healthy communities through connections to local food. So we have a lot of programs that delve into that, all of those different subjects. But I got to ASAP myself. I moved to Asheville in 2016 and knew of ASAP and sort of watching the organization, knew of their involvement in farmers markets, went on the farm tour that I'm now helping to organize in 2016, had a lot of fun, and finally was able to see a position posted and get a job with ASAP. And initially I worked on a conference that ASAP was producing in 2018, and shifted roles into our communications department to where I am now.
So your background is eclectic, I guess,
Yeah.
Not necessarily driven from the start of your education to doing what you're doing now. I understand that you worked as a chef. You had some involvement with the arts, and obviously involvement with communication. But what was it about ASAP which specifically appealed to you, and what you thought you could do with it?
Yeah, so ASAP feels a little bit about the culmination of a couple of different lives and jobs I've started. So I did start working in magazines as a writer, primarily in the arts, was always interested in food and sort of the different culture and history pieces around that. Left the magazine world for a while, went to culinary school, cooked in restaurants, ran my own catering company for a little while, and eventually got tired of living in New York City, wanted to live somewhere where I felt like we could put down more roots and be more connected to a place. So
Good metaphor, roots, good metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. So my now husband and I basically threw darts at a map and picked Asheville to move to. That's not entirely true. We knew that it had such a strong food scene, such a strong growing scene, but felt like definitely a different kind of a smaller city, but still a city, but to give us enough difference from having lived in New York. So we moved to Asheville at the very beginning of 2016, and I wrote for a while. I did a couple of things in those first few years in Asheville, but really felt like coming to ASAP with the local food emphasis, but also really ASAP's a storytelling organization to a large degree. We are trying to tell the story of food and farming in our region and invite the community into that to experience it and take part of that in that story. So all of those pieces felt like a little bit of a culmination of a lot of work and searching I've been doing.
So obviously the connection between food and the arts and entertainment is not an anomaly, or maybe it was an anomaly, but it's very prevalent. People are looking at things, watching art, and they're also eating. And you can see, you can go to farm markets or farmers markets, which is what I used to call them back in the olden days, farm markets, and there might be somebody playing music at the same time.
Absolutely.
So they're interrelated. But let's, on a more serious note, from what I'm saying. Let's talk about, again, what ASAP does, the people that are participants, the certification process, et cetera, because obviously there's a serious business here. Most people, presumably most people listening to this show, have heard things like farm to market, buy local, and then that's all smushed in together with, organic and probably 16 variations on a theme. Distinguish for us between all that and how,
Yeah.
or at least how that works with ASAP.
Sure. So I think I'm going to talk a little bit about how ASAP came to be, because I think it sort of sets that up for us. So farming in Western North Carolina in like as late as the 80s and 90s was largely dominated by burley tobacco. And that was sort of what farmers did to make a living in this region. And it was, I mean, I don't want to say easy. There is no part of farming that is easy, but in terms of there were government subsidies. They had one sale of tobacco. It was to, one buyer every year. They weren't doing a lot of marketing and promoting of their farms for that livelihood. The tobacco buyout was coming, and a group of ag supporters knew that that was going to change the way of farming in Western North Carolina. And there was an effort to not want to lose farming as an economic drive, both as an economic driver in our region, but also in terms of land preservation and, part of the soul, the soul or whatever you want to get to in the region. So a group of people came together, farmers, ag supporters, and basically just started having some conversations about what can farming be if burley tobacco is not the backbone, this sort of center of what farming is in Western North Carolina. And essentially after, lots of, this went on for several years and a couple of different, research projects. He really hit on local food, if farmers could transition to become direct market diversified produce or meat farms, that we would be able to keep farming in the region and keep it as something central to who we are. And that really, and that was absolutely coinciding with the local food movement happening throughout, I think, the 90s and early 2000s across the country. It happened we're known now as having a very strong local food scene. And that all of that is that switch that was happening between burley tobacco, but also this national movement toward, local food, farm to table, where does your food come from? So what eventually became ASAP formed as something called the Local Food Campaign, which was a promotional campaign around trying to let the community members know, like, buy local. Here are farmers markets, setting up more farmers markets, helping to increase the capacity of farmers markets that existed, giving farmers tools to know what their market outlets were, know how to reach their customers, marketing tools, business planning tools, financial tools. So that was the Local Food Campaign that eventually in 2002 became the 501c3 that is ASAP now. It is still one of our biggest programs. A lot of our pieces fall under the heading of that Local Food Campaign. In addition, we were working in schools and with communities to teach kids, give kids that connection to local food, which eventually became a Growing Minds Farm to School program. So that is another big component of what ASAP is doing, and connecting with kids. But we say farm to school, but we are definitely connecting through preschools, childcare, and just families and communities in whatever ways we can find to do that. We also have the Local Food Research Center as one of our programs, where we're constantly checking in with the field, both looking at our local agricultural community, and what we do a survey every year of the farms in our network, but we're also looking at data coming in regionally and nationally through the ag census and in other reports, so that we can kind of be tracking where our region is, what the needs of our farmers are, trends we're seeing in our region over time, all of those pieces. So those are sort of the main components of what ASAP does now and how it came to be. That's still a pretty big overview.
Okay, so before we go further, let's define what we mean by local, as far as where ASAP sits and the community, so to speak, of farmers that you serve? Where are
Sure.
they?
So we have what we call our Appalachian grown region, and that was defined based on the 60 counties within 100 miles of Asheville, which is the market center for this particular region. So that is Western North Carolina, as well as sort of the bordering counties in Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. And we define that as our Appalachian grown region. A lot of times, the shorthand is Western North Carolina because that is the bulk of that region. But I mean, and obviously, depending on where you live, local may very well go outside of that region, but that's in terms of the farmers that we're serving and the farmers markets that we're listing in our local food guide, which is our publication where we tell you all about everything that's here: farmers markets, restaurants selling local, travel destinations, all of those pieces.
Okay, so everything connected in effect to local farming. Now, again, one thing you didn't say that I said was this business of organic, but before we get back into that soup, there is another distinction, I understand, as far as the farmers that you serve, and there is a certification, excuse me, process. But one of the other labels is family farms. There's a whole Americana, mysticism, folklore about the family farmer. When politicians want to be influential in getting votes from folks who have family farms, they harken back to days with, the single horse, the plow, and the farmer in the field. But you do serve family farmers, I think, exclusively. Can you tell us about whether that's true or not, and then tell us what it is a family farm?
Yeah, so family farm is a little bit of a shorthand. What we're talking about is that with a family farm is one in which an individual or a family is holding the financial responsibility, taking that risk, and providing the majority of the management decisions for the farm. We're not talking about a corporation or a larger, a factory farm. And in general, there are many different sizes of farms that we're serving, but in general, the farms in our region are smaller. A lot of that is geographic because of the mountains. Our farm, we don't see farms growing
acres and acres and
growing
acres.
corn and soy the way we would in the Midwest. Not to say our farms don't grow corn and soy. We've got, some of that, but it's all happening on a smaller scale. And they tend not to be selling to these, large wholesale chains, wholesale distributors that this food is by and large staying in our region. And again, a lot of that is geographic. Some of it does come out of that tobacco buyout history of, what farms were doing and what they were able to transition to. So when we talk about family farms, it doesn't necessarily need to harken back to that, ma and pa out, with the American
pitchfork.
Yeah, the pitchfork in the front yard. But the idea is that these are independently held farms. Sometimes we call them mountain farms as a way of not necessarily saying family farms. All of that it's a loose definition, but the idea is that these are independent entities. And then the organic piece, organic and different certifications can be very important for what food you decide to eat and what you're looking to buy. ASAP's not certifying growing practices of these farms. Many of them are organic. Some of them are certified organic. Some of them are, we list organic not certified because the certification for organic has a cost and a bureaucracy to it, certainly. So a lot of farms have decided, they do grow organically, but they don't certify because they have a direct relationship with their customers and they know their customers have maybe been out to the farm or have buying from them from years, and they have that trust built with their customers that they don't need the USDA's stamp of approval on that. They can say we're growing organically, and they have the relationship and their customers know that. So what ASAP is trying to do is provide the consumer or the community member with the tools to be able to learn that about farms, and whether that's contact information, ask your farmer how they grow. or, have develop a relationship with them at the farmers market. You're able to, when we have we have a printed local food guide, which is obviously, by being print, somewhat more limited in the amount of information about each farm that is listed, but we also have an online local food. The online version of that is more expansive and lists growing. And so growing practices is one of the sections, and you can actually search on that website for certified organic, not certified, on down to permaculture, animal welfare approved, different pieces you may be looking for in a farm. So we want to give you the tools to be able to find organic farms if that's important to you, but we're not an organic organization.
Okay, so fair enough. So part of what you're saying, as far as what I interpret, is this: local, family, as applied as adjectives to farm, doesn't mean that every farm obviously has all of the same characteristics in terms of
Absolutely
what they produce, who they sell it to, what their farming practices are. But there does tend to be a certain constellation of factors which are probably in common. When you mentioned, again, earlier, the transition from tobacco farming to the type of farming that's prevalent in Western North Carolina and the adjoining communities in other contiguous states, that obviously was a huge transition, as you indicated. Maybe not easier, but much less complicated. The nature of local farming and the nature of producing products that are consumed more or less by themselves. In other words, if nobody goes and typically and buys, a pound of soybeans, I'm guessing, I'm probably showing some ignorance, or you're not necessarily buying a bunch of barley, I guess. You might be buying barley, but not in that form. So those are crops that are sold in bulk to large companies and ConAgra and Archer Daniel Midland and so on and so forth. That's not what that doesn't mean that some of these farmers don't have connections with them, but the basic pipeline essentially is local people producing things that people like to buy at farmers markets or in the grocery store. And the idea of local at least suggests, doesn't guarantee, that it's fresh, that it didn't travel in a freight car long distances from California, Florida, or Mexico, and that because of that, it was grown in a certain way where its ability to withstand long haul was not the prime issue. The prime issue was, how does it taste? How does it look? Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, and I mean, we certainly have a huge diversity of farms in our region, but I think by and large, the farms that ASAP tends to be working with, because we are working with so many of those direct, assistance for that direct marketing piece, those are the types of farms that have this direct relationship with customers and what they're growing. And that may be because they sell at a farmer's market. It may be because they have direct relationships with chefs and they're selling primarily into our restaurant scene here. They may have agritourism pieces on their farm. So they have people out on, physically on their farm. There are definitely farms that are that are growing sort of large scale for our region. Again, compared to what happens in California and the Midwest, our large scale is not large scale. But there are definitely, I mean, not all of the transition from tobacco came to this kind of other ideal of this, like having your farm and taking everything to the market, although that is a lot of what is visible in terms of the farmers that we serve. There's certainly, I mean, Christmas tree farms, I think we won't get fully into that, but that's another space where that is Western North Carolina produces a lot of Christmas trees now. So I think that was another piece of transition from burley tobacco as well.
So before we move on, let me reintroduce Sarah Hart from the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, commonly referred to as ASAP. which was a good name that somebody came up with because it does have the local connotation associated with it. But you've told us now what local means in the context of what we're talking about. So there are things that ASAP does, there are things that ASAP sponsors, and there's a connection between ASAP and both the growing community, meaning the farmers themselves, and also the buying public. And you had mentioned earlier on this concept of certification, and you distinguished that you're not talking about certification from the standpoint of some auditor going out to a farm and saying, okay, we see that you've got this going on, or you're using insecticide here or whatever. But there is a certification, which is, as I understand it, more of a self-reporting concept. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so we have our Appalachian Grown Certification Program, and that is sort of, those are the farms that ASAP is listing in our local food guide. And I mentioned our online local food guide. That online database guide is at appalachiangrown.org. So our Appalachian Grown farms, we update that guide, and essentially we recertify farms every year. And essentially that is somebody from our office, and it is a long process, talking on the phone or via email and saying, are you still growing? Where can customers find you? Is this still what you're growing? And how are you growing it, and a number of other things. And so that how are you growing it is where you would get into those growing practices. A farmer would tell us how they were growing it. And farmers are essentially, if we can reach a farmer on the phone and they say, we're still growing this and we want customers to contact us, or, here's where customers can find us, then, and we'll give you all the information about what we're doing, then they are recertified as Appalachian Grown. Usually, sometimes we'll reach a farm who says, oh, I'm no longer farming, or I'm taking a year off, or whatever. So that certification goes dormant. And then I think we have a sort of a 2-year period of which, if we can't reach you and get you to confirm any of this information, then we take away that certification. But it is something that because we do it every year and we talk to these farmers and have a relationship with them, we feel like it's good data in terms of what we're putting out there.
Good data, at least in terms of it. I'm sorry, good data, at least in the sense that it's current data.
Yeah.
Obviously, somebody could, for whatever reason, misreport or say something, which is, I don't know. Again, you have a survey, and let's talk about that in a second. If the survey says, do you use pesticides, or do you use chemical weed control or whatever, and a farmer would like to be able to say no to that, but he or she or the family that runs it's not maybe pristine pure, maybe they use less of it, but they still use it. There's really no way from your process that you would be able to validate that.
Right. And we're not trying to validate that. There are other organizations, the USDA specifically, in terms of certifying organic, that go out and do these things, or the NCDA, the North Carolina version of that. So ASAP is trying to, and I think as a service, we're collecting that information so that consumers can search for, I want a certified organic farm. But what we're really trying to do is give consumers the tools to connect with farmers and ask them the questions. And sure, some people may misrepresent, but by and large, farmers, I think, are trying to represent what they're doing, and they know their audiences, and they're trying to meet that audience need. And that's some of that direct relationship that happens either via a farmer's market, or via agritourism, or via community supported agriculture, is that, it's sort of that you know your customers, and your customers know you. So incorrect information is probably going to get spotted out. But that isn't ASAP's, that's not ASAP's role in this. We're trying to connect consumers with the farmers, not, and we're trying to tell you which farms are out there, what they're selling, here's who they are, so that you can go out and know them. But we're not coming.
It's pure free market capitalism. So anybody that thinks that the organizations such as yours are inhabited by socialists should feel good about the fact that basically it's the honor system. People report. If they misreport, presumably somebody someday will find out about it, and it will the farmer will have the consequences of that. But more specifically, can you estimate how many member family farms, so to speak, you serve?
It's around 900 in the greater Appalachian grown region. And that's about 600 in Western North Carolina, as well as those bordering counties that I mentioned. So, and that'll go up and down even throughout the year as we're adding new farms and, taking out farms that may have not exist anymore or gone dormant for a period of time. But it's about 900 farms that we're serving currently.
So that sounds like a lot. And I don't know how that compares with, non-family farms that you don't serve, but in terms of the size of those farms, but on average, are we talking average of 50 acres, 100 acres, more, less? And I know you got surveys on that.
Yeah, I don't have they are smaller.
Okay.
I want to say 50, but I don't have our data on that pulled up right in front of me.
Okay, well, let's talk more generically then about another metric, so to speak. Yeah. Most people in this area, and a lot of as it's grown across the country, are familiar with, again, farmers markets. Sometimes they're called tailgate markets. I'm not really sure what that doesn't mean they go to football stadiums before the big game, but in any event,
they pull up their trucks, drop the tailgate, and sell out of the back of their trucks.
Got it. Okay.
Not everybody. And then these days it's the hatchback, but they lift their hatchback and sell out the back of their hatchback. I think tailgates is a pretty specific word to our region. I don't know how much. I think ASAP started using it to differentiate between some of the farmers markets that tended to bring, trucks were coming in from further away and were more of a conglomeration of different farms, as opposed to this farm down the road selling at this market, and that the tailgate markets were smaller. I'm not sure that designate. I think that we use them both pretty much interchangeably now. Somebody explained to me once why we were using tailgate instead of farmers market, and then acknowledged that pretty much it's
it was because of a grant from GMC Trucks, but in any event, just kidding. Besides that way of selling, there are a number of these farms, I'm guessing, that also sell to, I don't know, independent grocery stores, but possibly non-independent grocery stores, like stores that we've come to recognize as being places where you can buy local, organic, maybe not organic, but whatever. Like, I'm not gonna do any free advertising for Jeff Bezos, but Whole Foods and fresh markets and so on and so forth. Is that true?
Whole Foods does buy some from some local farms. I think less in recent years, possibly because of Jeff Bezos or just their structural piece. I think Ingles actually does a better job of buying locally, especially in terms of value-added products. But they have some definite relationships with farmers, and we've worked with Ingles too. Sometimes if you go or in the produce section of an Ingles, look up, and there may be a sign that says "Who grows your food?" with a picture of the farmer and a little description of the farm. ASAP helped Ingles produce those, and we produce them for other grocery stores too. But I think Ingles is one of the. So, they are essentially a local chain of a grocery store. But yeah, so you can find some local food in the grocery store, but by and large, if you're looking to primarily buy local, the farmers markets, there are nearly 100 farmers markets in that Appalachian grown region. In the city of Asheville, there are, depending on the time of year, there could be between, in the winter, there's, I think, just 2 or 3 that are running in the winter, but there may be up to 10 in Buncombe County at the height of the season. So we are lucky with farmers markets, and most, you can go to a farmer's market almost every day of the week, which is pretty incredible. Many farms, especially as you get sort of outside that city center, farm stands are a great way to be buying locally, and some larger farm stands are selling both what they grow on that farm, but they may also be bringing in some produce from neighboring farms, sort of saying, we've got this space. Those operate in different ways. That's not exactly a farmer's market because you're not buying each piece individually from that farm, but still a great way to find local food. Community supported agriculture is something I mentioned a little bit ago. Some people know that as call it a CSA box. That's essentially like a subscription that you pay up front to a farmer at the beginning of the season. You're essentially saying, I'm buying a share of your farm for the season, and I'll support you come rain or floods or sunshine. And so then you get a weekly box of, usually it's produce. There are meat CSAs, there are flour CSAs, there are specialty product CSAs that you can pick up either from the farm or sometimes there's a group CSA or a workplace CSA, even where the farmers will bring all of those boxes into a workplace where people can pick them up. So that's a really great way, especially if you don't want to make the decisions every week, or you want some adventure in terms of maybe you'll get a vegetable you haven't eaten before. So CSAs are a great way to have that local connection. And then going out to farms and visiting can be certainly, and some of that, you may go out to the farm to visit a farm stand, but there's also agritourism, and that incorporates everything from, maybe there's U-Pick, like if you want to go out and pick blueberries in the summer, and some farms even have produce U-Pick where you can go out and pick a basket, and cheaper than especially if you want to buy in bulk. And then just, the fun of a farm tour. So some farms are open for all kinds of agricultural or sort of entertainment features during the year. But I'm leading up to ASAP's farm tour, which takes place September 18th and 19th. So next week or next weekend, which is an opportunity where we're connecting the public by saying, here's 20 farms, some of which may not be open to the public regularly, but they're going to be open this weekend, and you can go visit as many of them as you can fit into your day. And so we think the farm tour is often an entry point where, somebody might be looking for an activity, either with their family or with guests in town. They go to the farm tour, and we have found in our surveys that is often an entry point for somebody to start shopping at the farmer's market or start shopping at a farm.
So before we talk a little further about the farm tour, let me go back to one of the things that you mentioned, because it raises an important point. The subscription concept, where people will agree to buy a certain amount of produce or farm products and pay in advance. I have to imagine that is a really important addition to the farmer, because farming is still a very rough business, aside from all of the physical issues. And I do also want to make sure that we at least talk about the plight of farmers through the pandemic, which we're not apparently out of. But the commitment to provide money available to a farmer so that they can purchase things they have to purchase in advance, seeds, if they use fertilizer, tractors, and replace machinery, and so on and so forth. Having to simply rely on point of sale purchases to create revenue is not a really great thing for farmers. So that's presumably what was part of the idea of bringing that concept to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% how that sort of grew up in farming in smaller farms, not just here, but that's a concept internationally, I believe. But especially, and also at the beginning of the season, because the farmer doesn't have any income coming in yet. They have to buy the seeds and the equipment and all of the inputs that they need before they can be bringing in income. So to have that income upfront at the beginning of the season is hugely useful to farms. And And knowing that, and the initial idea with the CSA was that the community was there to take some of that risk with you, so that if you had crop failure that year, you weren't giving refunds necessarily. So, and different farmers handle that in different ways. And, and there's no hard and fast rubric for how that has to happen. But the idea of that this is a way to support our community and our farms. I was able to pull up a few stats for you, so I'm going to give those to you really quickly. Farms in our region on average are 8 acres, so they are considerably smaller. That's farms within our network in the region. And of those in our region, the vast majority are selling to direct markets, 92%. They may also sell to wholesale markets, but most farms are selling. We really like to encourage farms to have diversified markets, so that you don't only sell at the one farmer's market, and then that farmer's market's manager moves on and that farmer's market falls apart. You've still got places to sell, so that farms are usually selling to multiple markets, whether that's to restaurants and at farmers markets, or to wholesale and to a CSA, or have an agritourism operation is another piece of that diversifying of income. And I think that diversifying of income, if we want to jump into sort of where farms were during the pandemic, is what saved a lot of farmers. So we did that surveying at the beginning of the pandemic, and with farmers looking at, like, sales had dropped out in terms of restaurants, farmers markets were, there was such an unknown period that spring of 2020. A lot of farmers markets open in April and May, and many didn't open until June or July, because they just didn't, they had to figure out what was safe or what they needed to do in order to stay safe. So at a certain point, farmers weren't sure if they were going to have that access point of farmers markets, and did they need a way to be able to reach all of their customers who they were sort of counting on to come to the farmers market each week. All of a sudden, mailing lists, email lists were hugely important. So farmers could say things like, put in your order and I'll deliver it to you, which we saw a lot of in the first month of the pandemic. And then I think that died back because it was not a sustainable model for farmers, certainly. We're definitely still seeing farmers who feel the effects, again, mainly farmers who sold primarily to restaurants. But I think the long and the short of it was, after a couple of really sort of bad, scary months, that most farmers were able to pivot whatever income stream was being most affected, and not see the disaster of, I've lost all my income for the length of the pandemic. We were able to see some recovery in terms of those pivot plans. I mean, some of that is down to the, restaurants were a big one, but even in terms of everything, things that maybe we sold in bulk now all need to be individually bagged, because, everybody doesn't want to be putting their hands, especially at the beginning when we were when transmission was so much not understood, and the idea of touch transmission as opposed to
airborne.
Yeah, airborne. We just didn't know. So like how much more packaging materials did they need, and how much would that cut into their profits? So all of those were sort of some immediate things that looked scary, or boxes, if they were delivering to people now instead of having people come to the farmers markets. But I think in some follow-up surveys that we work we have in our 2020 Appalachian Grown Producer Survey, we did see a lot of recovery, or just things not being as bad as everybody thought they were going to be at first.
So clearly, at the very least, an adjustment, as you say, and an adjustment based upon some degree of recovery and also a better understanding. But again, it does strike me how vulnerable the farming population is. It's not as if it's always been hard. We got climate change, we got droughts, we got floods.
Yeah.
And then you add this level to it. And as you say, there were some restaurants, there were obviously a great number of restaurants that never recovered, or were out of business. And even if they weren't out of business, they were serving to a much smaller group of people. So the extent to which an individual farmer with 8, 10, or 15 acres was dependent to even 10, 15% of production, that's got to be devastating.
Yeah, the margins are small. And you mentioned flooding. just now. So one way that ASAP responded at the beginning of the pandemic to create, we called it the Appalachian Grown Farmer Relief Fund, and started raising money into that, and we're able to move some, organizational funding into that so that we could turn around and give farmers what we called the immediate needs grants. They weren't big, they were around $500, but it was, what do you need now? Do you need a shop on your website so that people can order online from you? Do you need to be able to buy more packaging materials? Do you need to pay a driver to go deliver food for the next month, your produce for next? So they weren't meant to like be recovery grants. They were meant to be, what do you need to do to pivot and pivot quickly? And we were able to get those grants out, within weeks of sending out that survey to farmers and putting out an application. So we had that at the beginning of the pandemic. And then, when Tropical Storm Fred came through, a lot of farms in our region saw like really, flooding, but unexpected, some farms just absolutely devastated in a very quick and unexpected way. And so essentially we took what had already existed, but we were sort of not using at the present moment, that those immediate needs grants and that relief fund, and we were able to bring it back up. There were a lot of people looking for, how can I support farmers during that time? So we're able to direct them toward that fund and essentially start sending out those immediate needs grants again for farmers affected by that flooding, but not even, but the idea is that Tropical Storm Fred is sort of what pushed us to redo that funding, that fund, but it will continue to exist for natural disasters and other, unexpected circumstances that farmers face, that they'll be able to apply for these immediate needs grants, which again, farmers may need just something to tide them until the insurance money comes in, or insurance money may not cover this one piece. I mean, it may be, I can replant, but I need to get a dumpster in here to just clean out my fields, and a dumpster rental costs, X amount of, so they're not, the immediate needs grants aren't, again, meant to be, here's how you recover your season, but here's how you need, what steps do you need? What do you need to take the next steps to get you to a recovery plan? So that's something that that sort of came out of the pandemic, but that we're able to continue in light of so many other unpredictable pieces of farming. And in addition, ASAP is working with other ag support ag support partners in the region, with FSA and
what is FSA?
FSA is the Farm Service Agency, and they do a lot of disaster relief. That's a government agency, as well as Extension, which is usually based in counties out west. Some of the counties are grouped together, but those are good partners on the ground, especially to come out and say, okay, here's your cleanup and new production plan. They can really help with some of that planning.
So you've made grants, ASAP has made grants, will continue to some extent, but you're not primarily a funding organization. You don't presumably have the capital resources to do that.
Right. We're a farmer support and, and community organization. So in terms of what we're offering farmers, I mean, we do, again, a lot of one-on-one support for business planning, market planning, marketing planning. We do a business of farming conference every year, which is sort of a lot of workshops put together on a lot of different subjects, again, around finances, business planning, different models of direct markets, like learn more about, as a CSA right for my farm, is agritourism right for my farm, what are my liability issues? So a lot of those pieces, we do offer some of those in standalone workshops through the year. And then again, we do a lot of promotion of farms, is another way we support them. So no, we're not a granting organization. In these immediate needs grants, the idea is that, sort of looking around and saying what need wasn't being met. Then farmers had a need for, like, I just need something right now to get me to the next 2 weeks when I'll get that insurance check or whatever piece it was. So that's the idea behind that. It hasn't, ASAP does, we do some granting as well. I mean, we have in the past. We also do some cost share work in terms of helping farmers produce some marketing pieces, whether sometimes that's a website or signage or other pieces that they may be producing. And we also give some mini grants and funding to farmers markets as well for capacity building. But more than that, we're money builds capacity, but we're also there. We have staff in there, working on technical support, both for farmers markets. We do operate a farmers market, but we also offer support and a network to farmers markets throughout the region. So our farmers market is the ASAP farmers market. Right now, it's the ASAP farmers market at AB Tech. It used to be Asheville City Market downtown. During COVID, we moved from downtown because social distancing, like there just wasn't enough space to be able to bring everybody down that city street. So we're at AB Tech until we figure out what happens next.
So it's interesting. So you ASAP runs a farmer's market, but there are also obviously farmers markets all over the place.
Yeah.
What was the reason for the decision to have that kind of a centralized farmers market, and what are the reasons for continuing it?
I think we saw that when Asheville City Market was initially formed, that there were the sort of the main farmers markets that were in Asheville itself were kind of at capacity, and that there were these new farmers coming in, and that there was a need for additional market outlets for farmers, and that we felt like the community would come and support multiple farmers markets, even some of them on the same day. And I think that has held true. We also think of our farmers market as a little bit of a learning lab, so that we are able to try things out and figure them out, and then sort of help other farmers markets implement those pieces. A big one was accepting SNAP. We were one of the first, or possibly the only market in Asheville 10 years ago offering SNAP benefits, that we could accept SNAP at that farmers market. And we've helped other farmers markets, go through the process. It's a little bit of a bureaucratic process, go through the process of accepting SNAP. And then now we have even at our market, we're able to pilot a program where we offer double SNAP. So SNAP customers coming to the market if they want to buy $10 on their SNAP card, they get $20 to spend at the market. And that is covered. The farmers aren't giving that away. The farmers are still getting paid the full amount for those SNAP tokens. So we piloted that at our market for a season, and then we have been able to expand it or support the expansion of it at 8 other farmers markets, both in Buncombe, Henderson, and Transylvania counties.
So ASAP does a lot of things. It's sort of an air traffic controller type concept, information concept. Do you find farmers or farm groups contacting you? I don't mean you personally, but with I don't know what to sell, or I don't want to produce, or I don't know how to do a website, or I'm too busy to show up at a farmer's market when I should be out in the field producing. Is that a resource that farmers have grown to expect?
Yes, absolutely. So ASAP definitely in market outlet planning, in terms of, what's right. What are you growing? What are going to be the right market outlets, especially for new farmers, but even advice on a farm that may have existed for a few years and says, I'm not sure I have the right mix of outlets. Would I be, are there other things? Are there other connections I could make? Are there other things I should be trying to do? And that's absolutely a lot of the one-on-one assistance that we give. For sure, we've helped help farmers sort of think about their websites and connect them with resource. We have a graphic designer on staff who has done a certain amount of design work and help with farmers around that, but we'll also have sort of a list of graphic designers and website producers and developers and things that we can connect farms with. We have a new and beginning farmers program where we have a small cohort of new farmers who've been farming for 10 years or less. So they're not like not necessarily brand new farmers, but we're really able to dig in with those 5 each year and help them with what are your main needs. And sometimes that's, we need a new website. And then we work with a website development company here in Asheville that they're a branding company as well that's done some branding and work kind of through this grant that we're able to offer these farmers for free. But again, even if they're not part of that new and beginning farmer cohort, our one-on-one assistance for farmers is always free. And we'll help you find, even if we're not able to build your and we're usually not able to build your website for you, we will connect you with the resources and sort of try to get you up to the point where you're ready to do that.
During the pandemic, again, which continues, I'm assuming that the ASAP staff, for the most part, works virtually. And I wanted to ask you, does that create some problems for, because we hear about, well, the absence of rural broadband. So
Mhm.
how does all that play out?
Yeah, so the ASAP staff has worked remotely most of the pandemic. We went back to the office, but everybody was able to make their own remote home, remote office hybrid work for them in June. I'm home today because we're masking in the office and I didn't want to do radio with a mask on. I'm usually in the office, but for sure we've seen that. I mean, so the ASAP staff, I think we made sure that everybody had what they needed. Our staff is primarily based in Buncombe, Henderson counties. We have a few sort of people further out, but who don't have that rural access problem. But when we did a virtual our business of farming conference, which I mentioned before, was virtual in 2021 because we do it in February, and that was absolutely an issue for a lot of farmers. And we worked with some extension offices, which then are sort of located out closer to at least where we're able to open up some space so that farmers could come and be on that broadband. Even that didn't always work as well as we wanted it to. So yeah, it's been a challenge to navigate for sure for the past. Yeah, I mean, because, and as the world becomes ever more digital, I think broadband in rural areas is a real issue that we know. I mean, some of our partner organizations and agencies have that as a major priority in their work is working on getting that.
Now, again, having the capacity of having or just having broadband obviously is a key component for some of the marketing that your farmers are doing. If they can't, connect with their customer base or can't, be the administrator for the website, or at least get somebody to do that, that obviously has a severe limitation on their marketing opportunities.
Absolutely.
So let's get into the wonderful world of farm tours and agritourism, which is an interesting word, sort of strange. And we know that that ASAP sponsors that program at least once a year, and maybe you have others throughout the year. What level of participation are you getting from the farming community?
So we've done the farm tour for about 15 years. We did cancel it in 2020. Was also canceled in 2015 because of the avian flu. So agritourism is sort of a big, mini farms offer different agritourism pieces that can be everything from a U-pick to we have come out and visit the farm and pet the animals to they're just different pieces of agritourism. And some farms are open to the public, even just come to our farm stand, but you're welcome to walk around to our fields kind of piece. But the farm tour, the idea is to bring in, and at its high point, ASAP was offering a farm tour that had about 40 farms participating, but that was a kind of logistical crazy town. So it's been brought down in more recent years. So it's usually about 20. We've got 21 farms at 20 stops. 2 farms are in the same location on the tour this year. So some of those farms are open to the public regularly. Some of them aren't. So this is a great opportunity, but it's also, the idea is that here's one weekend where we're offering you programs at 20 farms, pick where you want to go. So there's, and we're going to do a lot of marketing around it. So beyond what any farm could individually do.
Did you have more farming operations that were wanting to be involved, but you couldn't because of the size limitation?
Yeah, it was, this was kind of a weird year because we were even feeling out farms like, are you comfortable? Are you returning to agritourism activities yet? And everything's so unpredictable. I feel like we sort of put out an interest survey. We're a little bit limited because we do the farm tour for farms within an hour of Asheville. So we're not talking about all 900 farms in our, I think certainly there are probably farms further out who would love to participate, but as of right now, we're doing something where people can be driving from this central place. I think we hit on the right number. I don't think we were telling anybody you can't be part of this. I mean, there were some, I mean, there's always some farms that say, come out to my farm, see if I'm ready for this. Maybe I'll be ready for this in a few more years. So like there was certainly some farm visits and conversations, but I think we hit on the number of farms who wanted to participate and the number of farms we wanted to have for this year.
Okay, well, that hopefully you'll get a lot of participation. I guess people signed up as I did in advance. We just have a few minutes remaining. Why don't we make sure that you tell people how to find out more about your organization?
Yeah, so our main website is ASAP Connections, ASAP Connections with an S.org. And on there, you'll find information for whether you're a farmer or whether you're looking to find local food at farmers markets. Definitely information about our farm tour. That's where you can get tickets and find out more about the participating farms. And then I mentioned the AppalachianGrown.org website, and that's the sort of database online version of our local food guide. So if you're looking for more information about like farms you may want to buy from or visit, or what farmers markets are close to you, that's kind of a good starting place for that. You can also look for our local food guide. It's available for free in locations around town. We restock them every few months. So, restaurants, libraries, community centers, those kinds of places. And we didn't really touch on our farm to school program. We have a big farm to school program that has a separate website sort of geared toward educators and school nutrition staff, and that is growing-minds.org.
And again, we have a moment. What does that attempt to do? Educate students about farming or about the advantages of local farming?
Essentially it's making sure that kids know where their food comes from, but that farm to school can be defined
comes from McDonald's.
Farm to school is anything from a school garden to a farm field trip or a farmer visit to the classroom, or children's literature about food and where food comes from and local food, to working with school nutrition staff to are you able to bring in local food to your cafeteria? That's sort of a bigger piece than just here's a book about local food, but it's all important. And with the idea that kids can
educate them early.
Yeah.
Educate them
also
early.
Kids are so much, it's like we do taste tests in the schools and we're like, here, everybody, do you want to try kohlrabi? And the kids are all like, great, yeah, I'd love to try kohlrabi. And it's the teachers and the parents are like, ooh, no, I don't like that, or I'm suspicious of that. So kids are great.
I've looked at some kohlrabi. It's a pretty scary vegetable or whatever it is, but it does taste good.
It tastes good.
Well, I want to thank Sarah Hart for coming on the show today, communications manager for ASAP, Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, a nonprofit organization. I'm sure that in addition to finding out information, people could volunteer in some ways, to donate, give money, give time, and they can reach you on one or more of those websites.
Absolutely. Or if you want ongoing information, use those websites to sign up for our newsletters or find us on social media.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah, for being on the show today. We'll have you back. I hope things go through very well with the farm tour. I also want to thank my producer today, Mark Lieberman from Focus Solutions, and we'll see you again in the future. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.